In the depths of the Imperium's archives, there exists a classified text called The Spheres of Longing. Its author, Gideon Ravanor, wrote it after the Thracian Primaris disaster that left him confined to a life support chair, a floating metal sarcophagus, or a man still very much alive. One passage reads, "I no longer dream of walking, for my mind now travels paths no legs could follow. I no longer yearn for touch, for I can caress the thoughts of 1,000 souls simultaneously. I no longer fear death, for I have already died once in those flames." This is not the writing of a broken man. This is the manifesto of someone who transcended physical limitations to become something the Imperium both needed and feared, an inquisitor whose mind could pierce veils of deception across star systems.
But surely there's a cost to that kind of power. Nobody gets that strong without paying a price.
Indeed, the medical logs tell of psychic feedback loops that threatened his sanity. The inquisitorial censures speak of excessive autonomy and dangerous independence. His former mentor, Eisenhorn, eventually became his quarry and perhaps his mirror. But the true cost? That lies in what happened on Eustace Majoris, when Ravanor discovered that the Flecked drug epidemic was more than just another chaos cult. It was the beginning of a conspiracy that would force him to question everything, his methods, his loyalties, and ultimately, what it means to serve the Emperor in a galaxy where the line between heresy and necessity grows ever thinner.
So who was Ravanor before the chair? Before he became this legend?
Born in 304 M41, Gideon Ravanor was unremarkable in many ways. Imperial records are frustratingly vague about his homeworld, but they do mention his early induction into the Scholastia Psychana. Even as a child, his psychic potential marked him for a life of service to the Imperium.
The Scholastia Psychana? So he was soulbound to the Emperor from a young age?
Precisely. But unlike many psychers who end up as astropaths, or worse, fuel for the Golden Throne, Ravanor's analytical mind caught the attention of the Inquisition. By his early 30s, he was serving as an interrogator under Gregor Eisenhorn.
Wait, the Eisenhorn? The one who later became a radical?
The very same. Though back then, Eisenhorn was still firmly in the Puritan camp. He saw something in young Ravanor, a methodical brilliance, a dedication to imperial doctrine that mirrored his own. In his journals, Eisenhorn described Ravanor as having an unshakable dedication to the throne and a preternatural analytical mind.
Sounds like the perfect inquisitorial candidate.
He was. Ravanor specialized in xenology and demonology, becoming an expert in identifying patterns of corruption that others missed. His first major assignment came in 338 M41 on Lethe 11, hunting the xenophile heretic Beldame Sadia alongside Eisenhorn.
And that's where things started to go wrong for him?
During that mission, Ravanor witnessed his lover, Arianhrod S.W. Swader, killed by a dark Eldar homunculus. He himself nearly died from a poisoned glaive, but he recovered, physically and emotionally, with remarkable speed. Eisenhorn noted it in his reports. This ability to compartmentalize trauma and continue functioning.
So what changed him? What turned the promising interrogator into whatever he became?
Everything changed later that same year, during the Holy Novena celebrations on Thracian Primaris. Imagine a world in celebration. Millions gathered to honor the Emperor. Ravanor was there as part of Eisenhorn's retinue when Chaos forces attacked. A lightning fighter, damaged in the aerial battle, crashed directly into the festivities.
and Ravanor was caught in the explosion?
Third-degree burns across 92% of his body. The Medici gave him hours to live, but Eisenhorn refused to let his protege die. He commissioned a life support suspensor chair from the Adeptus Mechanicus, an incredibly rare and expensive piece of technology.
So, the chair saved his life. But at what cost?
Physically, Ravanor became what he himself described as a burned-out husk. He could no longer move, speak, or interact with the world through conventional means. But psychically, that's where things get interesting.
His powers grew stronger?
Exponentially. Whether it was the trauma, the isolation, or something about the chair's construction, Ravanor's psychic abilities surged to alpha level. He could read minds across vast distances, move objects with telekinesis powerful enough to crush a man's skull, and perceive the material and immaterial realms simultaneously.
That's terrifying.
Now you're beginning to understand. By 346 M41, just 8 years after his injury, Eisenhorn recommended him for promotion to full Inquisitor. The Ordos couldn't refuse, not when faced with a psyker of his caliber who remained utterly loyal to Imperial doctrine. As an Inquisitor, Ravanor quickly established a unique methodology. Unable to physically investigate crime scenes or interrogate suspects in person, he assembled a retinue of specialists who became his eyes, ears, and hands.
Like who?
Holland Nail, an ex-bounty hunter with unparalleled marksmanship. Patience Kiss, a telekinetic he rescued from a corrupt orphanage. Kara Swoll, a former pit fighter. Carl Thonius, his brilliant young interrogator. Each brought unique skills, but Ravanor remained the nexus, the mind coordinating their every move.
So he directed them remotely, through psychic communication?
Precisely. He could link with their minds, see through their eyes, even speak through them when necessary. Between 360 M41 and 400 M41, this team conducted 47 documented purges of chaos cults across the Angelus subsector. Their efficiency was unmatched.
But efficiency isn't everything in the Inquisition, is it?
You're learning. Ravanor's methods raised eyebrows. Some questioned whether his psychic intrusions violated Imperial citizens' rights. Others wondered if his isolation in the chair was affecting his judgment. But none could argue with his results until Justus Majoris. In 401 M41, Ravanor was deployed to investigate a new drug called Flect, spreading through Justus Majoris. What seemed like a routine narcotics investigation quickly spiraled into something far more sinister.
Let me guess. Chaos involvement?
Yes, but with layers of deception that even Ravanor struggled to unravel. The Fleck trade led back to Sector Governor Ozma, but Ozma wasn't who he appeared to be. He was Zygmunt Moloch, a heretic Ravanor believed he'd killed years earlier on Dura Prime.
A heretic posing as an Imperial governor? How did Ravanor miss that?
That's what haunted him. Moloch had orchestrated an elaborate scheme involving the Cognite cult and Enuncia, an ancient, dangerous language with reality-altering properties. When Ravanor finally confronted him, Moloch escaped, leaving Ravanor's team wounded and his reputation tarnished for failing to recognize the threat sooner.
So he pursued Moloch?
Obsessively. Across the mergent worlds, through the Witch House Chrono Displacement Portal, eventually to Utokre. This pursuit pushed Ravanor to his limits, and beyond what the Inquisition deemed acceptable. By 404 M41, Ravanor had defied direct inquisitorial orders to continue hunting Moloch. On Utokre, everything came to a head when he discovered the terrible truth. Carl Thonius, his trusted interrogator, had been corrupted by Flecht and become a vessel for the demon prince Slight.
His own student? That must have devastated him.
More than that, it forced an impossible choice. To defeat Slight, Ravanor temporarily allied with Moloch, the very heretic he'd hunted for years. Together, they banished the demon, but at the cost of Thonius' life and Ravanor's standing in the Inquisition.
The Inquisition doesn't forgive that kind of pragmatism, does it?
They suspended him, censured his writings. Some even called for his execution, but Ravanor had become too valuable and too dangerous to simply eliminate. The final chapter of Ravanor's story involves his former mentor, Eisenhorn. By 450 M41, Eisenhorn had embraced radical methodologies, including the use of demon hosts and forbidden knowledge. The Inquisition ordered Ravanor to hunt down his former teacher.
That's cruel, even for the Inquisition.
Perhaps it was a test of loyalty. If so, Ravanor failed it, at least in their eyes. Instead of capturing Eisenhorn, he engaged in clandestine communication with him. Both men recognized a greater threat, the Cognites' mysterious King in Yellow.
So they became allies again?
Not quite. Their methods had diverged too much. The breaking point came during the Beckwin incident, when Ravanor imprisoned the blank Elizabeth Beckwin to prevent Eisenhorn from using her abilities. Eisenhorn eventually breached Ravanor's facility on Miseramis to free her, exposing Ravanor's greatest weakness. His reliance on psychic powers rendered him vulnerable to blanks. Today, Ravanor's legacy remains contested within the Inquisition. His tactical manuals were purged after the Tertium heresy for promoting excessive autonomy. Yet, the Spheres of Longing remains required reading for Ordo Xenos acolytes.
What happened to him in the end?
That, my friend, remains classified at the highest levels. Some say he transcended his physical form entirely, becoming a being of pure psychic energy. Others claim he finally succumbed to the psychic feedback loops that plagued him for decades. A few whisper that he and Eisenhorn eventually reconciled, working together from the shadows against threats the Imperium refuses to acknowledge.
And what do you believe?
I believe Gideon Ravanor embodied the Inquisition's fundamental paradox, the need to understand corruption without being corrupted, to wield power without being consumed by it. In his own words, the chair did not limit me, it focused me, like a lens concentrating sunlight into a laser.
A mind unshackled.
Precisely. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, perhaps that is the most dangerous thing of all.
If you want to learn more about the Warhammer 40k universe, subscribe and check out the links in the description to read up on Ravanor.